Want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it. We've been working with Sea Shepherd for quite a few years, supporting their efforts. They're doing amazing stuff, as you probably all know. And we found out about this film about Paul Watson's life recently, and thought it would be great to share that with our customer base, which we're going to do tomorrow night. In the process, I reached out to Sea Shepherd to see if Paul would be willing to do a little talk this evening, telling us a little bit about what Sea Shepherd does, and giving us a little maybe insight into the film that we're going to see tomorrow night. Also want to encourage everybody that's on this call to support Sea Shepherd. They are doing amazing things around the world to protect the critters of the ocean, and they need our support to be able to continue to do that kind of work. So I encourage you to go to seashepherd.org and click on their little donate button, and anything you can give from $10,000 to $20,000 each of you would be awesome. Millions even better if you can swing that. But they might even name a boat after you if you get enough money in there. So
nobody would be able to pronounce it. So,
but so we're very lucky to have Captain Paul Watson with us tonight. Paul was one of the early members of Greenpeace, and in 1977 started Sea Shepherd as an organization to, as I mentioned, help save the critters of the ocean from illegal fishing and whaling opportunities. You may also remember Paul from a TV series in 2008 on Animal Planet called Whale Wars, which is a really interesting program. And he's done amazing work saving critters in the ocean. If you've spent any time on Google looking up Sea Shepherd and what the campaigns they're working on, you would undoubtedly be impressed with what they're doing. So one more time before I turn the stage over to Paul, I want to encourage people to donate, seashepherd.org, and anything you can give would be appreciated. So please join me in welcoming Captain Paul Watson. And thank you for being here, Paul.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, where to begin? I was one of the co-founders of Greenpeace in 1972, but I left Greenpeace in 77 to establish the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society. And the reason being is that I thought there was a need for a group to intervene instead of protesting. So Sea Shepherd doesn't protest. We intervene primarily against illegal activities. So we're really an anti-poaching organization, and we've been doing that now for about 42 years. But back then, the approach that I developed, I call it aggressive nonviolence. And we're quite proud of the record there. We've never caused a single injury to a single person, nor have we sustained any injuries to our crews. And when you consider that right now we have about 250 crew on 12 different ships, that's an unblemished safety record, which we hope we can keep. Right now with Sea Shepherd, we have two of our vessels, the Bob Barker and the Sam Simon, are deployed up in the waters of West Africa. Last year, we arrested 52 poaching vessels in West African waters. And this year, we're continuing that. We're not really saying what countries' waters we're operating in, but what we did develop over the last 15 years are partnerships. Started with Ecuador with the protection of the Galapagos, and now we have these partnerships with various governments. So we're now in partnership with Liberia, with Gambia, Tanzania, Namibia, São Tomé, Cape Verde. And what that allows us to do is we provide the resources and the volunteers, and they give us the authority because they put either their military or their police on board, and we're able to enforce in their waters. Of course, outside of of territorial waters, then we operate in accordance to the United Nations World Charter for Nature, which allows us to intervene against illegal activities. And so those are the Sam Simon and the Bob Barker, what they're doing right now. The Ocean Warrior, which is our fastest vessel, unfortunately is still stuck in Singapore because we're quarantined. And it doesn't look like we'll get out of there until the end of September, and those are because of Singaporean regulations. So the crew has been on that boat now since February, so they're quite anxious to get going. And as soon as it can be released, we'll be deployed to the Eastern Tropical Pacific. We'll be working with Peru and Colombia, protecting hopefully the sharks off of Mapello Island. We're also sending our vessel, the White Holly, down from Mexico to work with Colombians on that. And this last week, we've been involved with trying to get the Chinese fleet out of the waters south of the Galapagos. There's 300 vessels that are operating just outside the Galapagos National Park Marine Reserve. And last year, we were able to get into the midst of that fleet and document what they were doing. And we've been putting a lot of pressure on China. And I'm happy to say that in the last couple of days, China has agreed to withdraw that fleet. So that's a good thing. They have stayed out of the Marine Reserve. The Ecuadorian Navy and the park rangers have kept an eye on that, and they haven't ventured into the Marine Reserve. But they can still do a lot of damage outside of the reserve. We're about to start Operation Milagro again for the 7th year, and that is our campaign to prevent the extinction of the vaquita porpoise. And for that purpose, we have 2 former U.S. Coast Guard patrol boats, and that's the Sharpie and the Farley Mowat, and they're dedicated to protecting the vaquita refuge. And what we do there is simply go in and confiscate any net that they set. And so far, we've confiscated about 1,200 nets. That's about 120,000 meters in nets in total. And we've also taken about 10 tons of lead weights off of those nets, which we've now recycled into dive weights, 2-pound, 3-pound, and 4-pound dive weights. And the nets are actually cut up and recycled. And that's been pretty good, because I'm quite confident that if it wasn't for our activities over the last 7 years, that the vaquita porpoise would now be extinct. But we've been able to keep them out of that vaquita refuge on an ongoing basis. I don't know how long this is going to continue, but as long as they're threatened, we will continue to be there. And we're also doing anti-poaching patrols in the Mediterranean. There's a large dolphin kill going on because of the French fishing fleet in the Bay of Biscay. We have a campaign against that. That's an ongoing campaign. This week we'll be landing crew in the Danish Faroe Islands to oppose the slaughter of pilot whales there. We have a crew on the island of Mayotte. That's a little island between Madagascar and Mozambique, and that's to stop turtle poaching there. And that's a pretty intense campaign, because the turtle poachers there are quite violent. And one of the rangers that we were working with was injured last week because of when he was attacked by those poachers. So our campaigns are global. Sea Shepherd was once an organization. It's now a movement. We're in about 42 different countries. They're all separate entities, but they all work together under the auspices of Sea Shepherd Global, which coordinates the movements of the ships. And that's where we're continuing to work with volunteers. And, we get criticized sometimes because we don't have professionals, but we don't want professionals. We need people with the passion to do what needs to be done. And you can't pay professionals to do what volunteers do. I mean, you just can't buy that kind of passion. And that's, I think, the real key to why Sea Shepherd has been successful, is because of the passion and the courage of the individual crew members from all over the world. We've had probably about 7,000 people crew on the ships over the years in total. And I think that it's not only is it helping, but it's also a great educational experience for people. And a lot of people have gone on and started their own organizations or got involved in other issues, although they began with Sea Shepherd. And that's the kind of thing that we're hoping to inspire people. It's funny. I get calls all the time about what are we going to do about what are we going to do that. A few years ago, I got a call from a guy in Scotland. He says, well, they're killing gray seals here in the Orkney Islands. What are you going to do about it? And what I said to him was, well, I'm on the other side of the planet. What are you going to do about it? And he said, well, what can I do? And we helped them set up a Sea Shepherd group, and they're very enthusiastic. They went up to the Orkneys and just walked up to the sealers and literally pulled the rifles out of their hands and threw them into the ocean. And they all got arrested, but we won the case. But we raised so much publicity with that we bought that island, which is now a seal sanctuary, for the money that we raised from the publicity from that campaign. And so really the strength of Sea Shepherd really is in that kind of passion of the volunteers from all over the world. Of those 250 crew that are at any one time on the ship, about 25 different nationalities are represented. So we're truly a global movement in that respect. So if anybody has any questions, we can proceed from there. Hope you can still see me. I think it might be getting a little dark.
Dark there, yeah. It's yeah. For those of you that aren't familiar with Zoom, there's a chat function at the bottom of your screen there. You can click on that and fire your questions off to Kelly, and she'll relay them on to Paul. Paul, tell me a little bit about the film that we're going to be seeing tomorrow night.
Leslie Chilcott is the director. She did the film Inconvenient Truth with Al Gore, and she approached me a couple of years ago wanting to do this film. And I mean, she's quite good as a filmmaker, and I think the film is wonderfully done. It's very, it's incredible footage with the whales and things that she's taken. But it's a history of myself, but more it's really a history of Sea Shepherd. And I think that people seem to like the film. And I hope everybody who watches it will feel the same. But the most important thing about the film, I think, is that it really can be inspiring, especially to young people, to understand that, each and every one of us can make a difference. We can get involved and we can make a difference, and to not be put off by criticism or by naysayers, and just to proceed with what you're passionate about and follow it through.
I do have a couple questions coming in. The first one from Jessica. I recently noticed that you opened a Sea Shepherd office in Woodstock, Vermont. Why Woodstock?
Well, I live in Woodstock, Vermont, so that's more of our archive and production studio, really. The head office, we don't really have many offices. In fact, this is the only one in the US right now. We closed the one in California. Don't try to keep that overhead down. So our main office is in Amsterdam. That's where Sea Shepherd Global is based. But other than that, I think that's about the only office we really have. We're really operating off of the ships.
Nice. Jack was asking what the Seal Sanctuary is called.
In the Orkney Islands, we actually don't have a name from it. It's just a little well, I guess it would be Little Green Home, because that's the name of the island. So it's just we just have a sign on there calling Sea Shepherd Seal Sanctuary on Little Green Island.
I have a couple questions. You touched on it very briefly, but what is Sea Shepherd doing with regard to the news of the Chinese fishing fleet camped outside the Galapagos?
Well, as I mentioned, we've been working with Peru, we've been working with Ecuador, and we got a lot of evidence last year. We're also working with SkyTruth, and SkyTruth monitors these vessels from satellites. And the pressure on China has been enormous, and China has agreed to pull that fleet out of there.
Completely? All 300 boats?
That's what they say, so we shall see.
So
I have to say, the Chinese are responsive. A few years ago, we caught, in 2015, we caught a Chinese drift net fleet in the Indian Ocean. Now, using drift nets is completely illegal. And we documented everything they were doing, and then we chased them. We chased them all the way back to the coast of China. And when we got there, the Chinese Navy was there, and the fishermen radioed them and said they were being pursued by pirates, meaning us. And the Chinese Navy got on the radio and they asked what this is about. And Captain Sid Chakravarti, who was leading that campaign, he explained that we had caught them illegally using drift nets. It had been fully documented. We had sent the stuff off to Beijing. The Chinese Navy said, well, bring them in. We brought them in. We went up the river with them into China. All those captains lost their licenses and the companies were fined. So if you present the Chinese with evidence, they do respond. They're not totally unresponsive there. China's
great to
under enormous pressure to provide, they got 1 billion people they've got to feed and everything. And the big problem is there's a lot of Chinese poaching off in African waters. So we're very much involved with that. But also there's a lot of Spanish poaching. Spain is probably second only to China when it comes to illegal fishing on the high seas.
Good one from Nancy Smith. What are some of the most significant challenges you faced over the years?
Oh, well, every campaign's probably, the toughest opponent we went up was against Japan because they threw everything at us, lawyers and,
Right.
throw a stun grenades at us and shot at us and everything else. Right now, probably the toughest campaign is Operation Milagro because the poachers throw Molotov cocktails at us and they shoot down our drones and, and attack our vessels. But there's always challenges, really.
Right. Kurt was asking, do you get any government funding from the U.S. or any other governments?
No, we don't get any government funding from any government. Actually, what we do is provide services to governments like African and Latin American countries, but we don't get any actual funding from any of them. We're really more providing for them than they.
Mm-hmm. They are for you.
No one's ever offered, and we've never really had never entertained the idea of accepting it.
Right.
In fact, we can't even get a discount on fuel in Mexico, which is sometimes very frustrating.
Megan would like to know if you're a diver. Are you a scuba diver, Paul?
Yes, have been since 1968. Started
Nice.
with Little Divers Den in Vancouver. That was with NAUI, actually, and when we first began. And then I got my nitrox certification in the Galapagos.
Is that kind of what fueled your passion for the ocean, or is that just something that you've kind of been born with?
Well, I was raised in a fishing village in Eastern Canada, so I was in the Passamaquoddy Bay, so I guess that's where it really began.
Yeah. Dana was asking how you pick your volunteers.
Well, the crew, people volunteer from all over the world, and we do, give them an interview and everything. One of the things that I always say, are you willing to risk your life to protect a whale? And if people say no, then of course we don't want them. And sometimes, we've been criticized by, that's a little unreasonable asking people to risk their life to save a whale. And I said, well, I don't know. In our societies, we ask young people especially not only to risk their life, but to kill people to protect oil wells, real estate, flags, and religion. So I think it's a far more noble pursuit to risk your life to protect an endangered species or a habitat.
Right. Some people are really into whale wars, or they were. When it was on Animal Planet, can you bring us up to speed on what's been happening with the Japanese whalers?
Japan has left the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary permanently. And in 2017 was a very notable year because that meant that for the first time ever, no whales will be killed in pelagic waters, in international waters. All whaling now is restricted to the national waters of Norway, Denmark, Iceland, and Japan. But we've been able to stop Iceland for the last 2 years, and I think that Iceland it'll be permanently halted there. We were there over the last 2 years, but nothing's going to happen from here on in, I think, in Iceland. So we could go to oppose whaling in Japan, but sometimes you got to know when to back off and not put these people into a corner. And I'm quite confident that whaling will be dead in Japan within 5 years because it's hugely subsidized. And the worst thing that we can do right now is to go in there and stir up all this nationalistic fervor to protect the whaling industry. And so we've just decided to lay back and put all our emphasis on stopping whaling in the Faroe Islands right now.
Right. Aaron asked if you, Sea Shepherd, get involved in other conservation activities such as fighting plastics in the ocean, anything like that?
Yes. Let me see if I can move to where I can get a better light because I don't think you guys can see me. Made the mistake of starting this outside when the sun was going down. There we go. And yes, Sea Shepherd is very much involved with the plastic issues. We have one project goes up every year and clears up this beach in northern Australia. working with the Aboriginal communities there. It's an incredible amount of tons and tons of plastic that we have to remove from those beaches every year. Last year, we took 40 tons of marine debris from Cocos Island off of Costa Rica. And we have beach cleanups all over the world. So I would say probably 1,000 tons of plastic are removed by Sea Shepherd volunteers every year.
Wow, that's awesome. Dave was asking, has COVID reduced official poaching oversight around the world due to quarantine and furloughed staff?
The pandemic has actually increased poaching because it's decreased enforcement amongst governments. And so we found this a few years ago with the Ebola epidemic off of Africa, that it actually was an increase in poaching there. That's one of the reasons that we were so eager to get our vessels back into operation in the West African waters. And of course, as soon as we go there, we find them. We're always going to find them. There's about 4 million fishing vessels in the world, and 40% of them are illegal. So finding illegal fishing vessels is not very difficult.
Terry asks, what kinds of action, support, and volunteer can folks do to support and facilitate the vision shared with the Sea Shepherd movement?
Well, there's 3 ways to get involved with Sea Shepherd. One is volunteering to be on the crew and working on the ships, or sometimes on shore campaigns like stopping turtle poaching in Nicaragua or Guatemala or Mayotte, different places. And or also people can be shore supporters, which is doing the educational issues or fundraising, that kind of thing, or people can just be contributing members.
I have a question that came in from Jack asking about the dolphin slaughter in Taiji. Has Sea Shepherd been involved in that at all?
Well, actually, Sea Shepherd started the protest in 2003. We were the first to go there and actually document and expose that. And in fact, that was probably the best documentation ever, because it was before they actually put up all the barriers to prevent anybody from filming. And we were there. We helped work on the film The Cove, which won the Academy Award. And we were there pretty much every year until a couple of years ago. And then what Japan did was that they banned everybody who was connected with Sea Shepherd from entering the country. So we simply ran out of volunteers. So as soon as when it was like they put their equivalent of the CIA on us. Anybody who showed up in Japan who was bound for Taiji was just simply not allowed into the country, whether they had visas or not. And everybody was searched, and we got a few people in, but eventually we just ran out of people. I think we probably sent about 1,000 people in total, but we just simply ran out of people after a while because so they made it very difficult. But the Dolphin Project is still there. I guess they weren't considered as much of a threat, and they are doing documentation though, so they're still there. And but we just simply physically haven't been able to return. So that's why we're concentrating our efforts on dolphins in the Faroe Islands, where they kill pilot whales and dolphins every year. And also the biggest dolphin slaughter right now is in the Bay of Biscay by the French fishing fleet. So we're putting a lot of emphasis on opposing that.
Where was that?
In the Bay of Biscay, off the coast of France. So literally thousands of dolphins are being killed by those fishing fleets. And the bodies are washing up on the beaches. One of the things that we did do is we took some of the bodies from the beaches and just brought them into Paris, put them in front of the corpses in front of Eiffel Tower, in front of the Parliament buildings and everything. That got their attention and everything. And then they said they were going to arrest us. I said, well, go ahead. We'd love to go to trial on this. So they dropped the charges against us.
Jack was also inquiring about the overfishing of sea cucumbers. Have you had any involvement in that?
Yeah, we had a big fight with the fishermen in the Galapagos a few years ago on that. In fact, they took 6 of our crew hostage on Isabella Island, and then they held up a lot of the old tortoises were held up as hostage. They threatened to kill them too until they got their way. Unfortunately, the Ecuadorian government gave in to their demands, and that's one of the problems we have worldwide. Is fishermen have a lot of political power. I even coined a word for the relationship with politicians. I call it homopeshophobia, which is the politician's fear of fishermen. They seem to get what they want. But, so we've been encouraging a lot of these governments in Ecuador and Colombia and whatever to just take a strong stand in opposition to that. So, because illegal fishing is just one of the main problems in our ocean, overfishing, unregulated fishing. We're literally fishing out the oceans. It's as simple as that. And the slogan that I try to get across all the time and make people think is, if the ocean dies, we all die. And it is the life support system of the planet. And for instance, just phytoplankton, we've had a 40% diminishment in phytoplankton population since 1950. And that provides 70% of the oxygen in the atmosphere. If phytoplankton goes extinct, well, we all die. It'll be a major extinction event.
Paul, is Whale Wars still filming?
Oh, no, there's no need for us to have whale wars because the Japanese are no longer in the Southern Ocean.
Right.
So that was a success. We actually achieved what we wanted to do. I know we did one year, we did a whale wars in the Faroe Islands. And that was interesting because that was in 2011. And the Faroese came up with this strategy to deal with us. And the strategy was, we're simply not going to kill any, whales while you're here. And that was great. It was this, we said, yeah, well, that's great. That's exactly what we want. He said, well, you're not going to have the footage. Oh, I said, there's plenty of archival footage. Don't worry about that. We'll get it on the air. And we did. But that was one of our most successful years, is bringing the film crews there on that. It's a difficult campaign. The people in the Faroe Islands we have a lot of supporters in the Faroe Islands, but they don't dare say who they are. So the support is very covert because of so much peer pressure and harassment if anybody comes out and publicly opposes the killing of the dolphins and the pilot whales. It's actually worse in Taiji. It's worse in France in many ways because it's not done for any commercial reason. It's not done for any other reason that they like to do it. And so they slaughter the entire pods. Then they had the kids go down there and start picking the eyeballs out and pulling the teeth. And I've got pictures of kids posing with the fetuses that are ripped out of their mothers. I mean, the whole thing is so damn barbaric. But we got to keep the pressure on it. We've been fighting this for years and years. And, you don't win these things overnight.
Right. Our own travel agent, Jane, would like to know, how many times have you been arrested? And what was the longest amount of time you've been detained?
Well, I've been arrested numerous times, but I've never really been convicted of anything serious. I spent 120 days in a Dutch prison on a Norwegian extradition request, which I won after 120 days and was released. But I have to say, it was quite an experience. If you're ever going to go to prison, I recommend Dutch prisons. They're sort of like going to the and actually, I was considered I was called the Netherlands' only political prisoner at the time. And it was actually quite funny because I held a press conference every week at the prison, and the warden provided coffee and cookies for the press conference. And I noticed one thing very interesting about Dutch prisons is that, it's not illegal to escape. And not that I was trying to escape, but some people did escape. And I asked the warden about that, and he said, well, we think it's a natural instinct of human beings to try to escape captivity. So, we're not going to punish people for doing what comes naturally. So there's no extra penalties for trying to escape.
Was the Sea Shepherd headquarters in Amsterdam at the time that you were in a Dutch prison?
No, actually, it wasn't at the time. But all of our ships were registered in the Netherlands. And so our ships today are registered either in the Netherlands or in Dominica. And the Dutch registry has been very good to us, because Japan put pressure on every country we were registered in to make sure we didn't have our flags. So our Canadian flags were pulled, the British flag was pulled, Cayman Islands, Belize. I had Belize for 11 days before they pulled it under Japanese pressure. Well, they went to the Dutch, and the Dutch foreign minister went to the Dutch register and said, you got to pull a flag. And the Dutch registry said, no, we're not going to do that. And they said, well, I'm the Dutch foreign minister and I'm ordering you to do it. And he says, yeah, well, we don't have to pay attention to you because it goes way back to the Dutch East Indian Company. And it turns out that the Dutch government has no authority over the Dutch Registry of Shipping. So the Dutch Registry of Shipping got very offended by that, which guaranteed us that we could register any of our vessels because they took offense with the Dutch government. So we're actually quite in favor with them.
Awesome. Scott was asking, is there any movement to prevent boat crews from turning off their location transponders?
Oh, they do that all the time.
Right.
Is the fishing boat, everybody does that.
Right.
It's actually practically useless in many ways. But also the other thing that they do too is the Chinese fleet does this, is they actually can relocate their signal. So they might be spotted 200 miles from where they really are. The way to get around that is through satellite tracking and Sky Truth and everything, so we can actually see them from the air or see them from space. And that's how we've been able to prove that they're doing this, switching these signals around, because while here we see the boat, but here's the signal over here.
Interesting. What's the next biggest objective as an organization for Sea Shepherd?
Well, Sea Shepherd is no longer an organization. It's now a movement. So those campaigns are defined by the various places that we're at. But it's hard to really say. I don't even know what we're doing all the time now. We've got crews volunteer crews all over the world doing a dozen different things. A couple of years ago, I saw a news report says where Sea Shepherd Nicaragua had rescued all these turtles. And I'm going, I didn't even think we had a Sea Shepherd Nicaragua, but apparently somebody set it up.
Awesome. Did you have to step down from Sea Shepherd for a while?
Well, I did when Japan had a warrant for my arrest, conspiracy to trespass, which put me on the Interpol red list. It's interesting. The Interpol red list is for major drug traffickers, war criminals, and serial killers. I'm the only person in the history of the Interpol red list to be put on there on the charge of conspiracy to trespass. Didn't even do it, just thinking of doing it. And apparently that's on there. Costa Rica and Japan had me on there. But Costa Rica dropped the charges against me with the change of government, which shows you how political it is, that if it was judicial, they couldn't do that. Because they had a change in government, the charges were dismissed. So I was no longer on the Interpol red list for Costa Rica. Japan still has me on there, but they don't really want me because I've offered to turn myself in here. They don't really want me to do that because they just want to restrict my traveling. Is really what they want. The last thing they want is to put me on trial. And I think that'll all be resolved somewhat soon. They came after us. They took us to court. We had a major court battle with them. And it ended up, what happened there is that originally they wanted to get an injunction against us intervening against their activities in the Southern Ocean. And the Seattle Judge Roberts, who was in charge of it, Judge Richard Jones, who was in charge of it, he dismissed their application, saying that they came into his courtroom with unclean hands because they were in contempt of the Australian federal court, and he wasn't going to give them the injunction. And so we all got prepared to go out in December 2012, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they got their injunction from the Ninth Circuit Court without any explanation as to how. So we had already left. So we ended up finding that we were charged with 21 counts of contempt of a federal injunction. And so we went to court in November of 2013, and we were acquitted. And that was great, except that a year later, the Ninth Circuit overturned it without even talking to us, without even hearing witnesses. They overturned it and said we're guilty of the injunction. And they ordered us to pay damages to the Japanese whaling fleet. Well, that could have been like $50–60 million. But that's the last thing that the Japanese whaling fleet wanted. Because if we had to pay them damages, they would have to open up their books. And they didn't want that. They'd have to demonstrate the fact that $30 million of the Tsunami Relief Fund went to the whaling industry. That's the last thing they wanted to go. So they said to us, no, just pay our legal fees, and that's it. And so we gave them $2.5 million in legal fees. And then the next day we turned around and charged them with piracy. And now they were in the American court system. They had to respond. And that meant they had to open up their books. So they came to us and mediated. And at the mediation, they gave us a, I'm not allowed to say how much money they gave us, but it certainly compensated us for what we had to pay them. And then all the other part of the agreement is that Sea Shepherd USA, which is the only group that the Ninth Circuit had any control over, would no longer be responsible for what Sea Shepherd Australia or UK or France or the Netherlands did. So that was, overall we won, but it cost us. And now here's the smartest thing that I ever did in the entire history of Sea Shepherd, is I got legal insurance. And I think it was for $3,400 cost me for legal insurance. And that was a year before all this happened. And it ended up costing $8 million in legal fees, of which the insurance company had to pay.
Wow.
Since then, of course, our insurance premiums are a little higher.
Wow, that's impressive. Paul, have you been shot or shot at?
Well, I've been shot at numerous times. We were shot. There was one Whale Wars episode where I got struck by a bullet and I had taken out of the bulletproof vest that I had. That was interesting too, because when it originally happened, before the Japanese knew that I had been struck, they actually said that they had fired warning shots. And then when they found out that I had been struck, they said, oh, no, we didn't fire any warning shots at all. Those were just bang balls, they called them, whatever those were. So anyway, it was on camera when it happened and that. But, you know, we get shot at in Operation Milagro. The crew gets shot at all the time. I've had to equip that crew with, they got bulletproof vests, Kevlar helmets, netting for the thing. And we also installed high-powered water cannons to defend the vessel.
Wow. What happened to the Japanese boat who rammed the boat formerly known as Earth Race?
Well, that boat was never ours, the Audi Gill. It was never ours. They were working with us at the time.
Got it.
And that was a big problem. I'll never do that again. I'll let another group come in there because I had no control over it. Ended up losing it. And then they sued me because of the loss of their boat. You know, but and nothing happened on that. The New Zealand maritime safety people investigated and gave 50% blame to the Japanese, 50% blame to the captain of the Audi Gill. Now, what happened is that the captain of the Audi Gill, Pete Bethune, had boarded the Japanese vessel to protest, you know, them destroying his ship. And they arrested him, brought him back to Japan. But he made a deal with the Japanese, and they said they'd give him a suspended sentence in return for accusing me of ordering him to board. That's why I'm charged with conspiracy to trespass. Now, I didn't order him to board, and about a year after he came back from Japan, he signed an affidavit saying that he lied in order to get that suspended sentence. But unfortunately, Japan wouldn't take that, and that was one of the reasons I was able to return to the States, despite the red list, because of that affidavit. And John Kerry, who was Secretary of the State, allowed me to return. I had to wait out 15 months in exile because when all of this came down, the Secretary of State was Hillary Clinton, and she made it quite clear that she would have me extradited to Japan. So thankfully, it was when John Kerry became Secretary of State that I was able to return.
Is there a succession plan for the leadership of Sea Shepherd?
Well, there is no leadership, really. You know, the national directors and the captains and everything. I would say that the global CEO right now is Alex Cornelissen, who's based in Amsterdam. But all of the groups are independent entities. Lamia Essalami, she is the president of Sea Shepherd France, and Jeff Hansen's president of Sea Shepherd Australia, and Andreas Morello in Italy. So all of these different countries have their own leadership and everything. I don't have to really micromanage anybody, which is thankfully I don't really like doing anyway. So you know, I'm mainly just helping to coordinate the movements of the ships and the campaigns.
So do all the individual organizations deal with their own donations and where that money gets spent, et cetera?
Yeah, they do. And also every one of them is obligated to support Global, which operates the ships. So they're all raising funds which go towards the ships. And also at the same time, they have their own campaigns, you know, like whether it be beach cleanups or stopping poaching in the waters of their countries or whatever. We're getting a lot. For instance, Sea Shepherd Italy is quite interesting. There, we've got a great partnership with the police in Sicily to go after poachers, and one of our captains is a former chief of staff of the Italian Navy. He's a retired admiral.
Wow. Interesting.
Marla asked, you mentioned your satellite technology, among others, to view illegal ships. Do volunteers manage all of that high quality technology, or do you get help from the government? How does that work? How do you get information from the satellites?
Not us. We're partnered with SkyTruth, and SkyTruth is the organization that operates the satellite surveillance. It's that we work with.
I have many, many questions coming in. I'm quite a few questions behind, so I appreciate everybody's patience in getting to your questions. Getting there.
Well, I had a question. Was there a singular event that got you motivated to start Sea Shepherd?
Oh, well, there's a lot, of course, but you know, during the 1975 campaign with Greenpeace to oppose the Soviet whaling fleet, we found them off the coast of California, and we came up with this idea to intervene by putting ourselves between the harpoon and the whale. And so in June of 1975, I was in a small inflatable boat and with Robert Hunter, and we got ourselves in a position to block the harpoon of the Soviet whaler that was bearing down on 8 sperm whales at full speed. It's very rough waters, but I was able to maintain the block. And every time the harpooner tried to get a shot, I would maneuver to block him. And this worked for about 20 minutes until the captain came running down the catwalk and screamed into the ear of the harpooner. Then he looked at us, smiled, and brought his finger across his throat. And that's when I realized we were in trouble. And a few minutes later, there was this enormous explosion. This harpoon flew over our head, slammed into the backside of one of the whales in front of us. It was a female. She screamed, rolled on her side, and the largest whale in the pod slapped the water with his tail and dove right underneath of us and hurled himself straight at the bow of the Soviet vessel. And they were ready with an unprepared harpoon. Harpooner pulled the trigger, hit this whale at point blank range in the head. The whale fell back, thrashing in agony on the surface. And as he did, I caught his eye, and he dove again, and I saw a trail of bloody bubbles coming straight towards us. And he came up and out of the water at an angle so that he would fall straight down on top of us. And as his head rose out of the water and I looked into his eye, what I saw there changed my life forever, because I saw understanding, that the whale understood what we were trying to do, because I could see the effort that he could make to pull himself back, and his head began to slide back into the sea. I saw his eye disappear beneath the surface, and he died. And he could have killed us, and he chose not to do so. So personally, I owe my life to that particular whale. And as I sat there and the sun was going down in the midst of the Soviet whaling fleet, I said to myself, why are they killing these whales? You don't eat sperm whale meat, you make oil from it. And what do they need the oil for? For the Soviets, it's highly prized spermaceti oil for lubricating high heat resistant machinery. And one of the things that it was very much prized for was a manufacture of intercontinental ballistic missiles. And I said, here we are destroying this incredibly beautiful, intelligent, sentient creature for the purpose of making a weapon meant for the mass extermination of human beings. And that's when it struck me. We're insane. We're ecologically insane for sure. And I said to myself at that time, I'm not doing this for people. I'm doing it for them. Mm-hmm. And that's what I've done ever since. So I don't really, that's why it makes me immune from criticism, really. I don't care what people think about what we do. 1986, we sank half of Iceland's whaling fleet and destroyed their whale processing plant. And a former colleague from Greenpeace said to me, well, you know, what you did in Iceland was reprehensible, and, you know, you're an embarrassment to the whole movement. I said, yeah, well, so what? You know, didn't sink those whaling ships for you or Greenpeace or anybody else. We sank them for the whales, John. Find me a whale anywhere in the world that disagreed with what we did that day, and I promise you we won't do it again.
Wow, it's an incredible story. What's next for Paul Watson?
Well, I don't know. Right now, can't really go anywhere. You know, I've been doing a lot of writing and in contact with the ships and that all the time. And, you know, I got a 3-year-old right now. So
Bet that's keeping you busy.
he keeps saying, yeah. And also, you know, but I'm learning a lot from him. I've always felt that, you know, you don't teach kids, you have kids teach you. And that if you want to educate your children, simply nurture their imagination and their intuition and guide them along that way. And don't tell them what to do, because I've always felt all my life that what schools tend to do is to destroy intuition and destroy imagination and fill you up with all sorts of information, which isn't going to, you know, it might help society, but it doesn't help you. I think the best way to explain that is back in the 70s, I had the opportunity to speak to 3 schools, well, the same school, but different classes on the Haida Indian Reservation in British Columbia. And I spoke to the kindergarten first, you know, 5-year-olds. And the first thing I said is, how many of you kids speak Haida? Every single one of them spoke Haida. What do you know about whales? Oh, we didn't have to say anything. Just had to listen to all their whale stories. We got to middle school, half of them spoke Haida, half of them knew anything about whales. By the time we got to the seniors, nobody spoke a word of Haida and didn't care about whales at all. So we'd taken these beautiful, intelligent kids and turned them into raving idiots through 12 years of school. You know, so I don't have much use for the educational system in that respect. You know, to me, what you have to do is to listen to your children and go that way. You know, when I was a kid, I learned this because I got in trouble because I cut up a map of the world and I put the pieces together and I said, you know, I think this was all one continent one time. And the teacher said, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. That's a stupid idea. Why was I right? I was right. Not because I was smarter, but because it just intuitively made sense. But that's what we take away from our children, you know, is this intuition.
Has your son been introduced to whales yet?
Oh yeah, we went whale watching with him, and you know, he knows more about dinosaurs right now. But but no, he's become quite the animal lover here in Vermont. You know, we had a bear walk through the yard, and he was quite excited about that. So you know, I don't really have to, you know, do much other than to watch his relationship with these animals. He's very gentle with all the animals that, you know, including the insects and grasshoppers and things like this. And you know, he sees what we do, and he's quite proud of it, I think.
Good.
Guys, it's nearing 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock actually in Vermont, where Paul is, and I don't want to keep him too much longer. We really appreciate your time, Paul, and sharing your stories with us for sure, and our clientele. And want to remind everybody that we're going to be screening the movie Watson tomorrow, 6 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. And Kelly will be sending out a link to everybody that's on this this Zoom call today with the directions on how to get on to it. Also want to remind people that we have Peter Hammerstadt doing a talk for us on August 29th at 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Peter was the captain of the Bob Barker. I don't think he still is he, Paul?
Well, what Peter's doing right now is coordinating all of our African campaigns. So he's actually operating the Bob Barker and the Sam Simon, not as captain, but as director. He's the one who's meeting with all of the various governments and that. In fact, last year, Liberia gave us their highest military decoration. And it was Peter went there to receive that for our efforts in their waters. And so he's been doing incredible work with getting these African nations coordinated. And now he's just joined us also to coordinate the Latin American campaigns too. But I think he misses, like all of us, miss being on the ship when we no longer are in the position to do that. But what he's doing right now, I think, is far more important, and that he'll get back onto the vessels when he can. But I think we all, you know, any of us who served on the ships, we tend to be very nostalgic about going back whenever we have the opportunity to do it.
Peter was one of Paul's co-stars on Whale Wars, and actually did a talk out here. I guess it was, I don't know, 8 years ago. He was out at my store and did a talk, and went over really, really well. I'll never forget, there was a woman that had him autograph her arm and she was going to have it tattooed on her arm.
We have yet to see that tattoo, so if you're out there, I want to see it.
Yeah, Peter actually joined Sea Shepherd when he was 18, and so I think he's 37 now. So, but he he started as a deckhand and worked his way right up through to be captain, and he's a totally certified captain now. And but he's probably a really great example of how your passion can guide your life, and he's been totally dedicated to what we're doing ever since.
Yeah, he's a great guy and a great speaker. So I encourage people to check that out on our Facebook page. We've got a link to how to register for that on August 29th. Also want to once again encourage people to donate to Sea Shepherd. You can go to seashepherd.org and donate whatever you can. As you've heard from Paul, they're doing some very, very important work around the planet, protecting these incredible creatures of the ocean that we as divers all cherish and want to see protected as well. And I love your comment, Paul, about if the oceans die, we die. And I believe in that myself wholeheartedly. So one more time, I want to just thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's late there in Vermont, and we really appreciate you taking the time. And anytime you're in Colorado, please look us up. We're always, our doors are always open to you. We're glad to have you. And don't forget, you still have a trip to the Philippines that was donated to you. If you ever want to use that, you and your wife, was donated by Atlantis Resorts.
Oh, maybe someday we'll be able to do that. One of the things I find fascinating about Colorado is that you have the more divers per capita than any other place in the country, which is amazing when you consider you're in the middle of the country.
It's kind of a grass is always greener thing, It's like, I think there's more skiers in Iowa than there are in Colorado, but yeah, no, we have a very, very active populace of divers here that are itching to get back in the water as soon as they can, and hopefully go to one of our favorite places, Fiji, right, Simon? We've got Simon here from Voli Voli Resort in Fiji, is one of our guests on this call. So anyway, I want to thank everybody for participating as well, and hope you'll join me in thanking Paul, and you can thank him by donating. And we're getting a lot of great thank you, Paul, messages.
Yep.
And,
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
what an amazing person he is, and I'm sure you've got a bunch too, Kelly.
I do. They're streaming in. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We love your work. Thank
Thank you.
you so much.
All right, Paul, again, thank you so much, and have a great evening, and best of luck to you.
All right. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Good night.